Shirala, before we go into this lesson, we give all honor, all glory, and all praises to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rakakwadash. We double honor to the apostles and prophets and elders of Jemma's camp. Return on us great mercy for the before the 100% truth that have been created edified under. Shalom to the elect, the tabernacle of David, and Arabic to Zara coming to this lesson. Without ado, let's get into this information because we have
the information I get in is that I don't know when
title of the lesson is 1600s, or let's say black and white being a social construct. And the reason I'm bringing all that onto you because it hasn't been an original aspect of race or nationality, but more so to divide. Because when they go into the early information in 1600s, it says the concepts of white and black as racial categories were beginning to form, especially in the context of European colonization and the transatlantic slave trade. It says here's a brief overview of how these categories emerged and were understood during that time. The first part, early ideas of race. In the early 1600s, Europeans did not have the modern concept of race. People were more often categorized by religion and geography or culture. In other words, their nationality or nation, which holds different cultures and traditions, practices to be exact, like Israelites, like Hinduism, or in other words, Elamites, like Ishmaelites with Elam. Come on. As you go more into the more you understand, it says skin color was noted, but it was not yet the primary basis for social for social hierarchy or legal status. As you go on in the second point, it says, okay, apparently it's the same thing. Let me see if I get this. Second point. Colonization and slavery as European powers, especially the British, Spanish, and Portuguese and Dutch, colonized the Americas and began importing African slaves. Racial categories started to solidify. Africans were increasingly seen as inherently different and inferior, especially as justification for lifelong hereditary slavery. And this is indeed a fact according to law and testimony, because before let's remember the standard Isaiah 8 and 20 to the law and to the testimony. They speak not according to this, but that's because there's no light in them. The Bible already outlines that we would have gone into slavery according to prophecy. But let's keep reading. It's going to the whole thing. It says in British, North America, later the U.S. laws began to distinguish between Africans, later labeled black, and Europeans, white, by the late 1600s. Virginia passed laws in the latter half of the 17th century defining slavery as a status for Africans and their descendants and granting privileges based on whiteness. And we have to remember, we are not Africans. We are Israelites of the southern kingdom, the darker hue. According to law, testimony, and according to historical points. This information has been brought out not of our own mouths, but of scholars that did their due diligence. And of course of history dealing with the transatlantic slave trade. So what I'm reading here is indeed factual and proof, and what I'm saying here, we are the Israelites, is actually going back into historical books. Canon historical books.
Accept my game.
So let's keep going. And it says in 1700, Virginia passed laws in the latter half of the 17th century, so that defining slavery as a status of Africans and their descendants and granting privileges based on whiteness. This is what has been taking place. Development of whiteness. So it shows you the difference, how they separate, right? Segregate or separate for the purpose of one's benefit and one's downfall. Development of whiteness became a legal and social category that includes European Christians and excluded Africans and the indigenous people. Notice who was excluded. The very same Israelites, the Africans, the so-called what we will call Africans, we call African Americans, which were the Negroes, the Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, and then we have the indigenous people, which are the Northern Kingdom, the tribes, the Northern Kingdom, Northern and Southern, were the only one excluded in that sense. This category helped unify diverse European migrants under one identity, especially to maintain a racial hierarchy, and which still goes on even today. Cultural narratives, religious and pseudo-scientific ideas began to support racial divisions, portraying blackness as a mark of inferiority or even divine punishment, and whiteness as a symbol of purity and superiority. So you see how this whole thing plans out. Now you understand why the social construct of white and black came into fruition. It was never here before. These Edomites were known to be red. Hence, I had to bring that out because concerning the first part, I don't want people to still make that foolish claim. So we are removing all these nonsense at the end of the day, and all this is according to the law, the scriptures, due to our punishments, proverbs, and bywords. And the Bible tells us that would have happened. Let's go to the book of Deuteronomy real quick. Deuteronomy 28 and verses 30. I think it's 37 or 36. Bear with me. 36, let me see. 37. And it says, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither Yahweh shall lead thee. And the reason why this was going to happen is because of our disobedience. Let's go back a little bit. Come on, just do that. If verse 15, I try to go back to. It says, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy power, to observe to do all his commandments and the statutes which I command thee this day, or that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Which clearly came to pass because we are still being ridiculed under a narrative of black and white construct. Not to mention, even the transatlantic slave trade, which was mentioned, was something according to prophecy in the same book of Deuteronomy 28, dealing with what? Our punishments, which we can get. It says what? And Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Now let's identify it, because we know, according to law and testimony, it takes literally a step or footstep, or by carriages, by donkeys, or whatever you may, or even camels, to what? To reach from destination, to reach from where they were to Egypt and back. So this could only be referring to a future prophecy, which would be identified as America, spiritual Egypt, and Babylon, according to the scriptures. And we could prove that, because let's get a precept in Revelations chapter 11 and verses 8, where it says, and their dead bodies shall lie in the streets of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where also our power was crucified. And what does it mean to be crucified? Number one, they have X'd out the images and the understanding and the ways of the Heavenly Father and His Son, Yahweh Shai HaMashiach. Not only that, they have also unalive and crucified our people via hanging, lynching to be exact, even as gruesome as cutting our bellies open while burning us alive upside down. They have done all manner of wickedness unto a particular group of people, being the northern and southern kingdom. There's no doubt about that. It's part of history. These Edomites have not changed. So this could only so going back into the Deuteronomy 28, right, and verse 68, it will be referring to what? Spiritual Egypt, going through a spiritual, going through a bondage, which is America, because Egypt is said must the house of bondage, which is a precept. Exodus chapter 20 and verses 2, where it says, I am Yahweh, your power, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Right? So this being identified, with that being said, now you know why the black and white social construct came into fruition: to divide, to separate, and to hide. It's to divide and to hide the truth. Remember, we're dealing with a people whose nature is of this. Let's get a precept. Micah chapter 2 and verses 3. We'll close out, because again call from the boss there. So, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hands. Now, who have the power and authority to do these things today? Is the so-called white man, the Edomites. And they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses, and take them away. And so they oppress a man and his house, even a man's heritage. And we just read they were using this construct to oppress our people. You can't get around that. Let's keep going. Therefore, thus saith Yahweh, behold, against this family do I devise an evil from which ye shall not remove your necks, neither shall ye go haughtily, for this time is evil. So there's no way they're going to remove themselves from the judgment that is going to come, because of all their wickedness. Even though it was according to law and testimony, because of our disobedience, they decided to get upon themselves to do even worse than what they were supposed to do. So guess what? Their judgment is going to remain sure. So I hope this information and lesson was edifying. Shalom Yashavala, Kal Halalia, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakakwadash. We double honors to the apostles and prophets and elders of James Camp, but to great millstone, for the before the 100% truth that have been currently edified under. Shalom to the elect, Tabernacle of David, Albert Tazariak saying to you, Shalom to the next one.